Coming up on Mountain News this morning, in the contest for state attorney general, Republican Daniel Cameron made history on Tuesday. And the Kentucky Republican Party is filing a federal election complaint against Kentucky sports radio host Matt Jones. And Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell filed a bill yesterday to secure the pensions of union coal miners, but some are worrying it falls short.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News This Morning.
Good morning. The time is 5:30 on November 7th. I'm Madison Pergram, and thank you for joining us on Mountain News this morning. So it is a little cold, but there also is maybe a possibility for rain. But let's go to Brandon Robinson. Brandon, people need to start bringing out their umbrellas and their rain boots.
Yeah, keep it handy all day today because you're going to need it. If you're not seeing rain already this morning, you will for sure by about mid to late morning. Let's take a look at the WYMT studio camera so far. Things are quiet here in Hazard across most of the region, but again, temperatures are probably about the warmest they'll be for a lot of folks today, and then we'll start to drop as we head deeper into the day. Temperatures in the 40s in London and in Williamsburg, Jacksboro too, Jonesville at 45 along with Hazard, but you see 57 there in Monticello and 56 in Pikeville. Across the state, 52 Paducah, 48 Owensboro, 51 Louisville, Lexington, 48 Cincinnati, 58 down into Nashville. But our weather app forecast shows, again, temperatures will start to drop as the rain starts to fall, topping out right around, where, like I said, close to where it is right now. Then we'll start to fall in the afternoon as the cold front goes on by. We'll talk more about all that coming up here in just a little bit. Madison.
Thank you, Brandon. Well, one big question is on many people's minds after a too close to call governor's race. What comes next? A few thousand votes separate Republican Governor Matt Bevin and Governor-elect Andy Beshear. Their views moving forward differ. Beshear is planning the transition while Governor Bevin spent part of Wednesday explaining his reasoning to call for a recanvass, which included a shot at Secretary of State.
So for her to try to jump the gun on this and interject herself into this, a little suspect as well. We know there have been thousands of absentee ballots that were illegally counted. That is known, and this again is something that's being looked into. We know that there are reports of people having been turned away, incorrectly turned away from various voting booths around the state. Again, things that need to be corroborated and looked into.
The recanvass will take place Thursday, November 14th. And Andy Beshear is moving forward with transition plans after Tuesday's election, appointing J. Michael Brown as his transition chair. Beshear addressed a room of reporters at the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville on Wednesday. He talked about several topics, one of which being what he will do in office. He says he will rescind Bevin's Medicare waiver, and Beshear, the former Attorney General, will have to have someone fill the role. He says he has not decided yet, but has reached across party lines to get input.
Well, we're going to look at every option that is out there to make sure that we can provide affordable and accessible health care to our people. Well, I've reached out and left a message with Daniel Cameron. I'm going to talk to him about that issue.
As it stands, the House and Senate are Republican, along with every other constitutional office on the ballot Tuesday. And in the contest for state attorney general, Republican Daniel Cameron made history on Tuesday. At 33 years old, Cameron is the first African-American independently elected to a statewide office after defeating Democrat challenger Greg Stumbo by more than 220,000 votes. Chelsea Jones talked with the attorney general-elect about what this means to him and what he plans to do in his new job.
Who was going to get back to the bread and butter basics of being the chief law enforcement officer.
The election now behind him, Cameron says he's ready to fight the drug epidemic, an issue he focused on during his campaign. He says he's also ready to work with his Democratic predecessor and perhaps soon to be governor, Andy Beshear.
Well, I've worked with Andy in the past. We both traveled in the hallways of the same law firm for a couple of years. And so, again, I'll work with whomever wants to help fight the drug epidemic. I know as his time as Attorney General, he certainly focused on this, and so I will continue to work with him. And
Beshear also talked along those lines during his press conference this morning, saying that he's willing to work together and, quote, change the tone. Now, Andy Beshear and Daniel Cameron have both expressed meeting sometime in the future to discuss how Cameron will transition into the role of Attorney General. At the Capitol, Chelsea Jones, WKYT.
Daniel Cameron will be sworn into office in January. And the Kentucky Republican Party is filing a federal election complaint against Kentucky sports radio host Matt Jones. The complaint accuses Jones of serious violations of campaign regulations. It says Kentucky Sports Radio and a book tour for Jones' new book, critical of Senator Mitch McConnell, amounts to corporate donations to his political campaign. Earlier this year, Jones formed an exploratory committee to consider a run for the Senate, but he has not announced his candidacy. On Twitter, Jones responded to the complaint saying, quote, Mitch McConnell is trying to get KSR taken off the air. He goes on to call the complaint, quote, nonsense. And now in our latest live web poll, we want to know which Democrat you are most likely to support to take on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell next year. The majority of you overwhelmingly say House Minority Floor Leader Rocky Adkins. Matt Jones and Amy McGrath have similar numbers, ranking behind, well, someone else, which is in second place. And shockwaves from Tuesday's election could sway how races are run across the country in 2020. Washington correspondent Kyle Madura explains the political fallout in the nation's capital.
Washington insiders are recalibrating campaign strategy now that Democrat Andy Beshear is poised to become the next governor of the deep red bluegrass state.
Kentucky has a chance to send the radical Democrats a message.
Incumbent Republican Governor Matt Bevin strongly tied his campaign to President Donald Trump, but fell about 4,000 votes short.
It is a major wake-up call for the Republicans, and I'd certainly expect them to be running scared today.
While Republicans won 5 of the 6 statewide races Tuesday night, spokespeople for the Democratic National Committee see the results as a major victory.
If you lose, it sends a really bad message.
The president won Kentucky by 30 points in 2016, but they say voters just sent a distinctly different message straight to the White House.
Because Trump went to Kentucky, he campaigned for Bevin. He actually said, Bevin, if you lose, it's going to look really bad for me.
You can't let that happen to me.
And it does.
I think that's infantile analysis.
Those in charge of winning President Trump a second term aren't ready to concede just yet. A closer inspection of the razor-thin result in the governor's race is likely. And while the president is wildly popular in the state, surveys pegged Bevin as the least popular governor in the country. Mark Lauder with the Trump 2020 campaign says presidential support is the only reason this race was close.
These governor's races, they're very important from a state perspective, but when it comes to the national elections, they don't matter that much.
There's another potential test of the president's influence just around the corner. He's throwing his political weight behind the Republican gubernatorial candidate in Louisiana. Voters there go to the polls in just 10 days. In Washington, Kyle Madura, WYMT Mountain News.
Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell filed a bill yesterday to secure the pensions of union coal miners, but the Lexington Herald Leader reports some are worried that it falls short of protecting disabled miners. The bill would help stabilize pension funds for the United Mine Workers of America, but the bill does not reinstate a tax on coal companies that funds the Black Lung Disability Fund. That fund has been in jeopardy since last year when the tax was cut in half. Advocates warn that thousands of disabled miners could lose access to health care if the fund dries up. And a new court filing reveals new information in the class action lawsuit against Black Jewel. Attorneys entered into confidential mediation a few days ago. We have learned little progress was made. And since the bankruptcy case is mostly resolved, the federal magistrate wrote the class action will likely move into district federal court. And a Kentucky mining company is planning to lay off more than 150 miners near the beginning of next year. Nally and Hamilton sent warn notices to officials in Harlan, Nelson, Leslie, Bell, and Laurel counties, advising them of the possible layoffs. The biggest hit is in Pineville. That's where 97 miners could soon be unemployed.
We're concerned, but I will say this. I've got all faith in the Hamilton family. They've survived for decades here in the mountains, and I hope this doesn't come to fruition.
We reached out to Nally and Hamilton at their Bardstown office, and they did not want to comment. And 2 Eastern Kentucky natives died yesterday in a Tennessee crash. Transportation officials say Jared Helton and Justin Stanford were both working as contractors for A&A Safety. A third victim, Cody Fultz, is also from Kentucky. The crash happened on I-40 near Memphis. The 3 men were trying to replace reflectors in the middle of the road when they were struck and killed. The cause of the crash is still unknown. And in Leslie County, we now know when a woman charged in a deadly DUI crash will be back in court. Alyssa Noble's trial was delayed earlier this year. She faces murder, assault, and DUI charges in connection with the 2017 crash that killed Paige Hayes. She will be back in court January 8th. In a new trial date in a Clay County double murder case, police arrested Gregory Jackson several years ago. In December 2015, police say he shot and killed his parents. Investigators say he also destroyed parts of the crime scene by removing shell casings. The new trial date is set for September 8th of next year. And more than 60 leaders in Johnson County came together on Wednesday to come up with an opioid response plan. This community meeting was held by the Johnson Health Department to discuss and learn about the different resources that are available to those who are struggling with addiction.
That money was specifically for us to bring the community together and to try to come up with a plan that if we had a crisis, what would be the triggers that would push our response team out to be able to help people and help the community in a situation if it should arise.
Castle says they plan to host more community response plan meetings in the future. And fans of Pappy Van Winkle, listen up, a Louisville nonprofit is raffling off an entire flight of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon. We'll have the details.
The cold front approaching the region will bring us 2 things, rain and much colder air for the first part of the weekend. I'll tell you about both in about 3 minutes.